The movie opens up with the greatest escape artist of all time, Harry Houdini, standing on the edge of a bridge, all tied with metal chains and ready to jump off. In the background, Houdini mentions that while other people want to escape from their hectic life, he is always trying to escape death, performing risky acts. He then jumps off the bridge right into the frozen lake while a huge crowd of people watches on with amazement. The movie then cuts back to 17 years, where Houdini arrives at a brothel-like place with his wife Bess Houdini to perform and entertain the audience there. However, seeing the dilapidated and vile state of the place, Houdini changes his mind and decides to walk out. But Bess asserts that they have no choice, as money is running out for them. She then tells the audience that Houdini is going to perform an act in which he will escape from a sealed trunk while still restrained. Even though most of the audience is laughing, there's at least one person who points out that the handcuffs they brought are fake. Houdini, ever the master of contingency plans, assures the crowd that he will use any handcuff they provide. One of the audience members who called their act a fake turns out to be a police officer and surprises them by brandishing a real handcuff. Houdini is frightened by the cops' intense pressure at first, but he quickly becomes agitated once the cuffs are placed on his hands. Finally, he slowly turns away and opens it with a pin-like device he keeps in his belt. The crowd, and the police officer in particular, are immediately impressed by this, and they applaud enthusiastically in his favor. From that moment on, the title of Best Escape Artist in the United States was synonymous with Houdini. He then went on to perform in a number of other shows, during which he not only broke free of handcuffs, but also of metal chains that had been wrapped around his body. Bess says she wants to do something besides perform shows one night, but Houdini makes it clear he does not want to go back to a regular life. Instead, he aspires to become a top-tier escape artist. This triggers a flashback to the time when Houdini and his brother Das were watching a traveling troll perform an illusion. Houdini is so captivated by the show that he begins daydreaming about a future in which he can make a living as a magician. And as time goes on, he picks up a few tips and tricks that help him make a buck or two. His mother appreciates the money Houdini earns and is happy about it, but his father isn't a fan of his son's public performances. As a result, he and his sibling run away from home at a tender age in search of adventure. The three Houdini sons band together to perform magic tricks for tips in order to help their mother financially. After a few years of performing together, Houdini spots his future wife, Bess, dancing for a street trouble. He sneaks off to watch her perform and is instantly smitten by her grace and beauty. The performance ends, and he approaches Bess, asking if she would like to collaborate with him. From then on, they are inseparable, and together they perform magic for celebrities all over the world. Das, Houdini's brother, who is still in the United States, tries to emulate his famous stunts to maintain his own reputation. But this doesn't sit well with Houdini, so he goes ahead and does even riskier tricks that nobody else would dare to try. The action then jumps forward to 1896, when Houdini and Bess go to a well-known prison to request that the head sheriff put him behind bars. Sheriff initially declines, explaining that his department can only house felons, but eventually agrees after Houdini makes fun of the quality of their prison and bets $100 on it. We learn here that Houdini plans to pull this stunt because he knows he will receive extensive media coverage even if he doesn't pay for it. In the meantime, the sheriff has Houdini locked up pretty securely, and Bess kisses him goodbye. The sheriff becomes suspicious that she has secretly placed something in his mouth, but his investigation turns up empty. When no one is looking, Houdini uses the key opener he swallowed after kissing Bess to break out of jail. The press goes into overdrive and Houdini becomes an overnight sensation. Fans start recommending he break out of even the most heavily guarded facilities. In 1900, Houdini visits Chicago, Illinois in response to a dare issued by a local magician. After their earlier passionate kiss, he now finds himself bound head to toe in metal chains with a strap over his mouth to keep him from speaking. The guards at the prison were shocked when Houdini escaped after only 5 minutes behind bars. Houdini gained worldwide fame after his numerous prison escapes, earning him the nicknames the Handcuff King and the Breaker of the Chain. Houdini will be seen prop shopping one day. The store's proprietor seems to have a personal familiarity with him and also boasts that he created all of the wares for sale. Houdini is blown away by Jim's performances, especially the one in which the performer is suspended upside down in a box full of water and must find a way to escape. The next day, Houdini and Bess pay Jim a visit at his workshop, where they see the model he built for the water container trick. As soon as Houdini spots the box, He jumps inside with the help of Jim's assistants to see how long he can go without breathing. He manages to hold his breath for a good long while and then signals to be released. Unfortunately, the rectangular box on top of the container becomes stuck when Jim and his crew attempt to pull Houdini out, shocking everyone on the scene. Lucky for Houdini, Jim finds an axe and uses it to smash the cage, freeing the great escape artist. In the next instant, we are transported to a time and place where Houdini is actually demonstrating his water container trick in front of a packed house. He tells the crowd that the fire chief is standing by with an axe in case the container needs to be broken open in an emergency. Houdini then begins the trick with his legs still inside the box. Jim, the host, instructs his crew to conceal the container. After several minutes of waiting with no sign of Houdini, the crowd begins to worry. In response, the chief of the Chicago Fire Department shows up to break the container, only to reveal himself to be Houdini when he turns around. The crowd goes wild with surprise because they've never seen anything like it. As word of Houdini's exploits spreads across the country, the head of the United States Secret Service launches an investigation. They think Houdini is a fraud performing for the public in order to stay in the country illegally. Luckily, though, before any problems can arise, Houdini is contacted by V, the head of the British Secret Service MI5, to gain access to secret information from the enemies of the United States and the United Kingdom. William changes Houdini's birthplace from Hungary to the United States. Houdini follows through with the plan and travels to Germany to perform for the imperial family there. After he performs a nearly impossible trick, catching a bullet, he completely stuns them. Then Houdini arranges a meeting with William's officer Riley, where he spills the beans on some incriminating information he overheard while hanging out with Heisers. After seeing his work, Riley is extremely impressed and gives him nothing but praise. He leaves after handing Houdini a red book on Russian grammar and sending him on his way to the next assignment. A few days later, Houdini and his assistant Bess can be seen performing for a wealthy family in Moscow, Russia. Houdini uses a sly game in which he grants participants wishes to win their affections. He has them all put their wishes in writing and then has the youngest girl in the family pick one. To ring the bell in the Kremlin, it says, in light of the fact that the bells of the Kremlin have not tolled in more than a century. Everyone around you is laughing at your wish. On the other hand, Houdini being Houdini, he conjures a tiny rope and lets the little girl pull it. Incredulous onlookers watch as the bell of the Kremlin begins to toll as soon as she does. To further show their respect, they bowed their heads. After meeting William in London the next day, Houdini tells him about the Russians' plans. William compliments him on his hard work and wonders how he managed to ring the bell at the Kremlin. Houdini explains how the whole thing was a sham. When the young girl made her selection, he switched it out for one he had planned ahead of time. And his assistant, Jim, who was standing back, shot the Kremlin bell with his sniper every time the girl pulled on the rope. Just before they part ways, William tells Houdini that he needs him to go see the German ambassador and get some information out of him. In the next scene, Houdini is in Germany, where he is wowing the crowd and the German ambassador with a brand new trick. Jim reveals that Houdini is currently trapped in the safe with only 10 minutes of oxygen left. However, Houdini is not actually in the safe, but rather in the ambassador's office searching for some documents. Unfortunately, the ambassador returns to his office with a girl while Houdini is nosing around, forcing him to take refuge in the safe until they leave. In addition, the ambassador finds the safe slightly ajar, prompting him to secure it completely. Even though Houdini is a master locksmith, the pressure begins to mount once he enters a real safe for the first time. But as time runs out, he recalls his true identity. Harry Houdini, the greatest showman the world has ever known. Driven by this intent, he begins a methodical count of the safe's locks by mentally replaying the sequence of clicks he heard when the ambassador closed it. Even though he only has a few minutes left, he manages to open every lock and escape the safe. Once back on stage, Jim opens the safe to discover a number of gifts for Bess commemorating their 10-year wedding anniversary. Before entering the stage to thank Bess for being his partner and tolerating him for the past decade, Houdini runs into William and hands him the paper. The fakery of the gesture, however, bothers her. After the performance, she confronts Houdini, accusing him of caring only about his audience. A fight breaks out between the two, and Houdini ends up spending the night in a restroom by himself. Houdini and Jim visit a theater one day to see a video performance of Charlie Chaplin. Charlie is the new competition, but Houdini doesn't think he's doing anything special. Houdini gets home late at night and gets into another fight with Bess. The latter advises Houdini to stop playing Russian roulette with his life. But Houdini says he likes to see people baffled and then himself escape unscathed. While they talk, Houdini spots an ice-filled glass and gets an idea for his next trick. He hastily goes to the bathroom where he orders Jim to fill the tub with ice from buckets. As a next step, he performs his next trick while lying on his stomach inside an ice-filled bathtub. Several days later, Houdini is filmed standing on the edge of a bridge, metal chains bound around his hands, ready to leap into a pool of frozen water. This is the opening scene from the beginning of the film. Bess becomes nervous and scared after witnessing Houdini's daring leap. To her and everyone else's delight, however, Houdini is able to free himself from his metal chains and handcuffs while submerged in water. But just as the audience is ready to applaud, Houdini is carried away by the current. He tries unsuccessfully to free himself for a while until a vision of his mother appears to him. He is rescued from the icy water with her assistant. Bess gets into an argument with her husband once more after witnessing one of his dangerous stunts. After becoming enraged and leaving, Houdini eventually returns home, apologizes to his wife, and promises to perform only safe acts in the future. Then, in the following act, Houdini shocks the crowd by making an elephant vanish into thin air without endangering his life. After the show, the British agent Riley approaches him and asks him to travel to Europe and Washington, D.C. with some classified information. Houdini initially declines Riley's request, but is eventually persuaded to go after hearing how much his fans would enjoy a world tour. The action then moves to the Empire Theater in 1914, where Sherlock Holmes creator Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is also in attendance. Houdini walks through a wall in front of him as he watches eagerly. Soon after the show ends, Arthur goes up to Houdini and personally thanks him for his amazing performance. After Arthur leaves, Jim runs into Houdini and gives him a telegram. In the letter, Houdini's brother tells him that their mother has passed away. Houdini is so upset by the news that he collapses to the floor. When Bess sees him, she rushes over to pick him up and hold him on her lap. Once Houdini has collected himself, he asks Bess to delay his mother's burial until he can be present at the service. The next scene finds Houdini at his mother's funeral, where Jim asks if he can make contact with her through his supernatural powers. Houdini, however, makes it perfectly clear that his entire act was just a trick designed to entertain the crowd, and that he is not endowed with any sort of supernatural powers. Houdini undergoes a radical transformation as a result of the tragedy. He begins to devote more time to watching films, but every day he fantasizes about making contact with his mother through the intercession of the divine. He reaches out to a number of so-called clairvoyants, who all claim to be able to communicate with the departed. All of them, however, turn out to be fakes. Houdini, infuriated, reveals their identities and even publishes a book about them in the year 1925. Houdini runs into Sir Arthur and Lady Doyle again. Lady Doyle claims she can see the future. Lady Doyle claims she can get in touch with his mom and sets up an individual meeting with him. Simultaneously, a fortune teller arrives and Houdini asks her to tell his fortune. She reads his palm and tells him he will die soon. After that, Houdini is with the Doyles, getting ready to contact his mom's spirit. Lady Doyle, supposedly possessed by the spirit of Houdini's mother, picks up a pencil and scribbles something on paper. When the procedure is complete, Houdini expresses his gratitude to Lady Doyle for contacting his mother, and he smiles. Unfortunately, upon closer inspection, Houdini discovers that Lady Doyle's writings are forgeries. His mother did not speak English, but he reads the text and finds it written clearly. Additionally, he informs Jim that it was his birthday on that day and that his mom will never forget it. After gathering these pieces of evidence, he goes on radio and in newspapers to expose Lady Doyle and Sir Arthur as frauds. Also, he offers $25,000 to whoever can help him communicate with his mom who passed away. Houdini travels to Boston, Massachusetts in 1926 to meet a well-known clairvoyant by the name of Marjorie. He sits in on one of her sessions at the table and reveals her phoniness. Marjorie, enraged, pays a visit to Houdini in his hotel room and makes a futile attempt to seduce him. In light of this, before she leaves, she soberly informs Houdini that he will die soon and that they will then possess his soul. Houdini's next show will take place in Detroit, Michigan, and will feature him escaping from a water-filled rectangular box. While Houdini has performed this trick before, he fractured his ankle this time around. A doctor checks on him after the show and advises him to rest. But Houdini insists on continuing his performance despite his broken ankle. Sometime later, while Houdini is with his fans, a man walks up to him and gives him a hard left hook to the stomach for criticizing Lady Doyle. Houdini cries out in discomfort, but he doesn't tell Bess or Jim about it. Instead, he moves on to his next performance. Unfortunately, as he is speaking to the crowd, he suddenly collapses, prompting Jim to quickly call for an ambulance. Once at the hospital, Houdini undergoes surgery, where doctors discover the ruptured appendix that will likely result in the legendary escape artist's death. The bad news is delivered by one of the doctors who walks up to Houdini. He also describes how Houdini is a fantastic entertainer who helped millions of people forget their problems for a while. Meanwhile, Bess and Jim hear the news and are similarly devastated. In a short amount of time, word of Houdini's illness had spread like wildfire, and Bess had begun receiving letters expressing concern for her husband's well-being. She is touched by the generosity and begins to understand how much joy her husband brought to people all over the world. Sadly, Houdini passes away at the young age of 52, having mistaken one of the nurses caring for him for his mother. After the passing of Houdini, the entire world seemed to go into mourning. Reverend Arthur Ford, the first spiritualist in the New York City church, invites Mrs. Houdini to one of their sessions at the end of the film in an attempt to make contact with Harry Houdini.